Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast, brought to you by Line 6. Line 6 is a musical instruments manufacturing company that specializes in guitar amp and effects modeling and makes guitars, amps, effects pedals, and multi-effects. We introduced the world's first digital modeling amp, and we're behind the groundbreaking Pod multi-effect, which revolutionized the industry with an easy way to record guitar with great tone. Line 6 will always take dramatic leaps so you can reach new heights with your music. And now your host, Beau Burchell.
Welcome, everyone. It's Beau Burchell back here again, taking over another episode of the URM podcast, Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast. I am really excited about today because I have one of my favorite people, Phil Sgrosso, with us. If you don't know who he is, he was in As I Lay Dying, Wovenwar, Poison Headache. He's toured with Nails. You know, he's played with us and Seosin, and just an all-around incredible guitar player and awesome dude, professional hair farmer. And and here he is, Phil. What's up?
Hey, Beau. Thanks for having me, buddy.
So, dude, I posted a thing saying that we were going to be talking to you, and everyone was pretty excited, which, as am I. But
yeah.
So let's just jump right into it, and we'll be fast because I have to get to a session, and I know you have to take off too. So I guess let's talk As I Lay Dying. I thought you were a founding member, but from what you were saying, you joined kind of shortly after.
Yeah, so the band had formed / started in 2000, and they'd released a couple, I think one full length and an EP, and then the first full length for Off Metal Blade for Elwood's Collapse. And I had joined right after that was released, so my touring with the band started with that album, and then led up to the next album, Shadows Are Security, where I finally was a contributing songwriter and performer on the album.
Awesome. Here's some questions that I have, and I think that people will probably want to know these answers too. So, I mean, you guys were probably one of the hugest metal bands of the time. You know what I mean? It was like, to me, it was like you guys, Kill Switch, and
Lamb of God was, they've always been
huge,
pretty far up there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say, those bands were, probably started a few years ahead of us, and I feel like they were always kind of like big brothers to us. Kill Switch especially, just kind of maybe having a sound that was a little more relatable with their fans. But yeah, I mean, we just, we're always on tour, always, putting albums pretty consistently. So, I think that really helps, keep our fan base interested in us. That there was never enough time for them to find another band to like.
Right.
We were always keeping busy.
Especially compared to now, because you figure now you can put out a crazy record that is something that no one's ever heard of before. Like, oh my God, this is that fresh new sound you were looking for, And then you, like, as soon as you get off tour, there's 4 bands that copied you and are on the radio.
Yeah, and you're not as unique anymore. It's, which goes to show there are a lot of capable guitar players out there to hear something and be able to emulate it, I guess. But, no one can really, emulate like Lamb of God or something. They can all try and be close, but or like a Hatebreed. It's like, how many hardcore bands have there been after Hatebreed, and Hatebreed's Hatebreed.
Right.
But, I think if you really have that, you're kind of a pioneer with a sound, then, people will be close, but they'll still never match it, or who knows, maybe they reinvent it and are better than you.
Yeah.
So
I mean, being that this is a show about like recording, like how much of like let's just say your sound do you feel like is made up of gear versus the percentage that comes from like you and your hands, or like you and your, or I guess before we get into like playability, how much of it do you think just is like in like the riffs you write?
Gear and I have always had this weird relationship that I don't really like it. I'm intrigued by it, and I'm intrigued by, always just learning something new. But my passion with music, stems mostly from how a song is written, how this story of, these notes here lead into these other notes here, and your root notes are changing, and it's kind of like how this song is evolving. But I guess, a big part of it is having a good team in the studio with you, or once it goes off to mixing and mastering. It's like we always liked having Colin Richardson involved, or Andy Sneap and stuff like that. So you hire these guys that you trust to take what you've kind of done and bring it to the next level.
First off, the fact that you got to work with Andy Sneap and Colin Richardson is just insane to me. It's like pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so being that you've produced records with like Adam D and had records mixed by Andy Sneap and Colin Richardson, like how important is, say, like the production compared to the mixing, or like the mixing compared to the production? Do you feel like one is more important than the other?
I think production is obviously, that's the foundation for everything, obviously, starting with the drums, going to guitars, and then splitting off to bass and vocals after that, and then adding all the other auxiliary stuff. I mean, you really have to get it pretty awesome. I mean, it's got to be great, because if you're wanting to keep kind of pushing the sound of the genre, you want to go in there with great results from the studio and then hand it off to a guy like Andy Sneap or Colin and be like, hey, just elevate this, make this even greater. And every time we were so happy with what the results were coming from both of them. And but I think they had some good stuff to work with, some good performances, some good takes, and I think kind of the collaboration of little bumps here and there, little dB bumps, and add this and add that, kind of that little collaboration from our end still going on, kind of always just made it better and better.
Yeah.
And then obviously you hand it to a guy like Ted Jensen to master it, and it's like, yeah, there's no reason to get another pass from Ted Jensen.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
one and done.
Right.
So I think throughout the whole process, obviously from when you're demoing and you're in the room jamming, you're like, the whole goal here is to make this better and better, pretty much like on a daily basis.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because even in our, couple months touring together, like I feel like that kind of like hard work attitude is very like, that's just you. You know what I mean? Like as a person, you're very much like, all right, I need to do my best, make sure I'm like really delivering everything and like doing everything to the best of my ability. So I don't know. I think it kind of all makes sense now that you guys just worked that hard on the records. So I guess to dig a little deeper at that, I don't know very many people that have had the chance to work with a team like you said, like Adam D, and then like those mixers, and then Ted Jensen. So when you were done producing the record, before it was mixed, are you generally at the feeling of like, man, this record's pretty good, I'm pretty happy with it, it just needs a little bit better mix?
Well, a lot of the time before even going into tracking, like officially tracking the album, we had already tracked pre-pro with like a dedicated engineer like Daniel Castleman. We had already laid down drums, recorded everything, and then we were prepared, from that point, we're like, show them to the label. And they'd be like, wow, these demos sound great. And it's like, cool, well, they're going to sound greater because now we're going to have, this guy on board and this guy on board. And like, we're just going to, I guess we were more than prepared, and we had kind of figured out just kind of already by pre-tracking things, kind of what we needed to fix and all that stuff. And we were always just very prepared for the most part, even though generally I would always want to add a million other things later on.
Right.
But I guess that answers that.
Yeah. So, it sounds like you guys pretty much had the record done before even going into the studio. So with a band like you guys, like what does a producer do? Or like what are you looking for?
So I guess once we had gotten Adam D on board, he was, all about trim the fat, and he, lines like "Don't bore us, get to the chorus," and we, whereas I would see a part as like 4. I'm like, okay, yeah, just do things in 4. He's like, hey, cut that in half. I'm like, do it as 2, and he's like, trust me, and once that mentality sunk in, it was like, yeah, like, wow, that really just kind of, we don't need that part to be as long as it was. And it really just helps move everything along. And then Adam D also being like, hey, let's get a 3rd chorus. Cause we used to be a 2-chorus band, say like on Shadows Are Security. And then he's like, let's get another chorus after the bridge. And we're like, really? Just can't go in this heavy part and be done? And so he was so helpful in us finding those songwriting, just that ability. And not to say every song has to be a 3-chorus song, but,
right.
And, we did 2 records with Adam, and you learn from someone like that, someone who's better than you at something, who's been doing it for so long, that you kind of learn their tricks, and then you kind of know what they would say.
Right.
And, like Adam would totally do this. But you then have that mentality as you're writing. So you're always having this producer mentality from the point of when you start creating. And so then we were like, okay, well, let's go with a different producer, because we could totally have Adam back on board again, but we kind of need to just change it up. So that's when we went with Bill Stevenson, who, plays drums for Descendants and recorded a lot of the Rise Against records. And it seemed like more of as our band was kind of, gaining success, it was like, well, we need to kind of break off into this world that it's, just a little more. I mean, we always wanted to have technical metal riffs, but we also wanted to kind of that less is more approach with some songs. So we thought Bill would be great for that. And then Bill really reintroduced a lot of new ideas to us as well. So that's why we wanted to work with him again on Wovenwar's first album. So yeah, I would say that producers kind of bring in just that fresh perspective on how a song's arrangement, how the flow should be, and also they're just the mediator. They really have to, between 5 different opinions, they have to be the one that lets people know that their opinion is heard, and make everyone feel like they're involved. But at the end of the day, you trust your producer as pretty much that 6th member to get things in a right place that everyone's on board with.
Right. So from there, walk me through the process of like what it's like to produce a record with somebody huge like that and you're in the band. So like once you're done tracking everything, is it like you get to go home with roughs, or is it just kind of like, I remember hearing the record in the studio, but I have no idea what it actually sounds like because I've never like taken it home and listened to it in my car or anything?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I can't remember. We would kind of get like studio roughs, but I didn't like hearing it unless, what was the point if, there's no bass on this or there's no vocals. It's like, I can, I've spent all day with the guitars. It's like, I already know the guitars are fine. Drums are already, if we're already on guitars, then drums pretty much are good, even though changes do come along, where you're like, hey, we should edit this drum part because this new guitar part's cooler and like blah, blah, blah. But it's not until you start getting, you send them off to mixing, and then you get that first rough back, and you're so excited because you're like, what did they do? What do they do to the guitar tone? What do they do to the drums? Like, where, how are they getting this new power added to everything, which is, for me, that's the appeal of Andy Sneap and Colin, is that they just can either pull so much power or add power to the part that you're just like, wow, our snare sounded weak before, and, you kind of know what they're doing, but at the same time, no one does it like them.
Right.
So that was always the most exciting, and there's never really, there's little tweaks, the 1 dB, the 2 dB tweaks that I would, generally have a, pretty long list of, just what kind of how I want things to hear, stand out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I'm the freak with that stuff, and probably drives them crazy. But I've sat there with Colin before, and when he came out to San Diego and mixed, it was the Powerless Rise album, and he was like, Phil, like, you get behind the computer, you make the little tweaks that you want to hear, and he was always on board with everything. And so it was, I don't know, very validating that, hey, maybe I'm not crazy, because, Colin's like in the back of the room air guitaring because he's so stoked on how like all those little tweaks make it sound better, I guess.
I would agree with that 100%. I do think that is a quality of a really good, and what's the word I'm looking for? Like, a confident mixer. You know what I mean? Someone that knows that getting the right feedback from the right members of the band can actually really help elevate the mix and the record to a level that may not have been capable without that feedback, and especially with someone who's as dialed in with the songs as someone, like you or anyone else, that's heavily, that was there for the tracking and has the vision of it. Especially when I do mixes, it's like when bands are able to come in and be like, oh yeah, no, like I've got this vision. This is supposed to be like this. There's definitely, yeah, exactly. Those moments where you're sitting there like, man, that is so cool. I didn't see it that way, but it's so much better.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I've heard of nightmares with other bands where it's like a total opposite approach with the guy mixing, and you're like, how did that happen? Right. But I guess, like, how did you guys even get in a room and decide to do a record together? Like, that sounds like a terrible pairing.
Right.
But, that's why, it takes a good level of intuition, I guess, to know who you're going in with, and you're like, hopefully they're, a team player with what our vision is, and fortunately, it's been great.
Yeah.
Even when it comes down to like, we're a week, past our master, like, the label's saying we're behind, we got to push the release date back. And you're like, no, but this one guitar lead has to have this 1 dB bump.
Right.
It's like, I don't care. It needs this, or I can't listen to it ever again.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess that's like on the mixing side of things. And then what is it like because you figure Adam D is just known for such like a guitar tone guy. What is it like? What's the process like in the tone dialing in department? Is it the type of thing where you guys just like plug into like an amp sim in Pro Tools, or do you like rent every amp in San Diego and then try them out? Or is it like he shows up with an amp this is the one, or how does it work?
Well, back then, I mean, their amp simulators weren't really a thing. I don't think. I mean, we're talking over for Shadows. That was 12 years ago. Funny story. An Ocean Between Us, the first album that Adam did with us, is 10 years old as of yesterday.
Oh, dude. Well, happy birthday.
Yeah. Which I was like, wait, on a Monday? I was like, I thought they came out on Tuesdays. Anyway.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
I'm like confused, and I'm like, all right, whatever. Yeah. So basically it was, and I was really young back then. I didn't know, like I said, Gear and I haven't always had this great relationship. So I always have to give credit to Adam, or to Andy Sneap and to Colin Richardson, because they would reamp our guitars.
Oh.
So that's part of how we viewed the mixing process, was that they have the gift of getting the best guitar tones. And we'd hear stories from them how bands were like, don't touch our guitar tone. We printed it like how we want it to sound. But then, from that point, Andy and Colin would have to shape the drums and everything around and kind of work with how these guitar tones sit in the mix.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it would have been ideal, and we actually had the opportunity on Powerless Rise when we brought Colin out to bring him 12 different amps, and they checked all of them, and they were like, all right, guys, here's the shootout. And we were like, this one, we love this sound. And then it's like, all right, get our hands on it, make these little baby tweaks with them. And it was like, that was the collaborative part of like getting our guitar tone with them. But for the most part, we always viewed it, these guys, Andy Sneap especially, is just the king of metal guitar tones.
Yeah. And then so, obviously time goes on. As I Lay Dying is no longer. How is the process different in Wovenwar than in As I Lay Dying? And what I mean by that is going from being like, what I'll say is like one of the hugest bands in the world, in the metal world, to like basically having to start over.
Yeah, starting, the four of us, the instrumental side of As I Lay Dying kind of sticking together and sort of having that musical bond. Carrying over into that wasn't as drastic as, four other guys who've never played in the band together.
Right.
So we kind of knew we had our way of how things worked, and then obviously the big thing is bringing in a new singer and adjusting the sound to that singer's strengths, which was, the more melodic, singing. It was not a single real scream on that first record from Shane.
Right.
So it was something that we, we're always interested in doing. And I feel like the As I Lay Dying sound musically was sort of headed in that direction. Although we would have still probably done a lot more like metal or thrashy sort of things. Like Wovenwar wasn't that thrash element. And because Shane's singing over a thrash song wouldn't really suit his strengths. So we kept things, making the music more rock based, I guess. It kind of had that tinge of rockness. And, but still, it was at a time where it was like, man, I am so tired of hearing breakdowns the way they've been for the past 10 years. So it was like, let's not do this. Like there's kind of this mental checklist of, let's not do this. Let's add these other elements here and give it a shot. And, it was a very controversial amongst our the As I Lay Dying fans, controversial album. And it was, I think there were just a lot of things when you're four guys coming from the same band before. It's like, well, why isn't this As I Lay Dying?
Right.
Why isn't this like the same thing? And like, why? I don't get what you guys did. And it's such a letdown. And you're like, well, this isn't As I Lay Dying. This is something new. And sorry that, we're the ones the band had to, stop playing and like figure out what to do next. Like,
right.
It's our fault for, taking this risk of a new sound we were interested in pursuing. So overall, we're all very proud of it. But, then, from that first album to the second one, it was like, all right, what elements do we want to add again and not do?
Right.
So, which, a lot of people would probably agree that it's a heavier album. And I think that was something that we all collectively were like, all right, let's get back to the heavy stuff. Because, we'd go out on tour and it's like, man, we're kind of the lighter band out of all this. And it's like, man, let's get it heavy again. So that was kind of a big motivating factor to do that. And I'm still just as proud of that album as well. So it's and it's a lot different, changing the tuning on that album, kind of it's just a whole different register than anything that we had done before. So it's still something that's like, whenever I hear it or hear a song, I'm like, oh, that's still refreshing to hear, at least.
Yeah.
For me.
I actually really love that record, and I still get excited when you were in the back of the bus just listening to the mixes over and over again, like making those notes of like the half dB up here, 1 dB there. What the heck is this? Oh man, like this needs to be fixed. This has got to be up. This is wrong. Where's my solo? Why is this muted? Like I just remember that, and it's so cool to like hear the record all finished. And you're right, because it totally, all those notes just make it so great.
Yeah, it just brings it together, and you know, you're obviously a production guy, so you know you're probably the same exact way that you hear it a certain way, and you just got to see it through until it's right.
Yeah. So now, I guess moving from Wovenwar, you've got Poison Headache, right?
Yeah, Poison Headache's been a band with two other guys, two of my good buddies back from San Diego that we've been doing, you know, jamming some of those songs for a long time, many, many years. And it was just to get any momentum really going with that, because I was doing the As I Dying stuff, doing the Wovenwar thing. It was just more of a fun jam thing. Like, man, you know, these songs are really fun, but are they ever going to see the light of day? So then finally there was a window of time to do it. And it was awesome, because Poison Headache is unlike all As I Dying or Wovenwar, obviously.
Right.
So it was this other side of me that, you know, really loves like hardcore and more like, I guess, crossover, whatever, like mixed with like just more crustier riffs, or something like it, like Entombed, you know, like throw an HM2 pedal in there, or something just
Right.
dirty, you know, and so, or like a Crowbar sounding riff, you know, and it's just a whole other side of me that I, you know, never could do really with As I Dying or Wovenwar, and so it was finally the time to do that. And you know, that record I took on doing a lot of the vocals. I engineered all the guitars. I recorded the bass. I sang some on it. So it was really like, if this is ever going to get done, I really got to do a lot with it. Even writing lyrics, which I had never really done before. But in doing all these things, I found like, wow, this is like really fulfilling for me. And even though it's more like a punk kind of hardcore thing, like I'm really proud that, you know, me and my buddies were able to finish this record and kind of start this other you know, journey with this sound of what we can do.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, you know, I think that the people like us that are doing it, that have such a high passion for it, to us, it really is something that we have to do, you know? And, and it's like, yeah, when you get, it's like, you know, you have to do these projects, and it's like, you have to have an outlet for your creativity and your music. And yeah, you're right. It's like, as soon as you get these projects done, you're just like, wow, I am so fulfilled. You know, like it's awesome.
It's rewarding, yeah.
And you're, speaking of taking on other jobs, you're also working in, like, I guess more of the management side with a couple different bands too now, right? Yeah,
it sort of started, the whole tour managing thing is that none of my bands had things going on this year. So I'm like, all right, well, how can I, you know, last year I was doing, you know, 4 different musical projects, you know, with doing the Wovenwar record, the Poison Headache record, playing Seosin songs, learning and playing Nails songs. And I was pretty busy as a guitar player. And, you know, once this year started, it was like, hey, everyone's just kind of gonna like chill out. And, you know, I left Wovenwar and I was like, okay, well, I need to sort of be doing something music related. And if I'm not going to be doing guitar right now, then, you know, how else can I put my strengths to good use? And the management side of things sort of, you know, worked out. I've got this artist, author and punisher from San Diego, who from the first moment I saw him, I was like mesmerized by what he does as like a one-man, you know, sort of electronic industrial doom band.
Wow.
And him and I sort of became friends, and just the idea of like, you know, he probably needs help, like with a lot of things. He's a one-man band and he does so much. He's like one of the hardest working guys. And I just was like, hey, do you need help with anything? And that's kind of how that relationship sort of started out. And then from there, you know, found the band Animals as leaders, kind of not having management but being at a level of success that they sort of need help with some things. And that's kind of how, you know, my management partner, Matt and I sort of got involved, and then from there it was like, hey, can you guys find us a tour manager for the tour? And I was like, when are the dates? And I saw the routing, and I was like, I'll just go out and do it. And figuring out how, their light production, all this stuff, I was like, this is great because it gets me still out on the road, which I've always been doing since I was 18, but I can also help this band in other ways. And I'm totally, fortunate enough that I still have this music related job that I can, help out these other bands that I believe in.
It's pretty inspiring too, just the way that it seems like whatever you kind of put your mind to do and to learn, whatever the task, it seems like you're able to put in the hard work and accomplish it, whether it be like you said, like, oh, well, they need this, I'm going to learn how to do it and go do it. And it's not like you're just tour managing. That's not like just going out and saying like, oh yeah, my friend's band is going to go and do some shows at a local bar and I just have to kind of like get them drink tickets. I mean, like they're like a no joke band. I mean, they're huge.
Yeah, it was, I guess I've just been trying to take on these things that it's a little intimidating at first, but it's kind of once you get into it and start doing it, you'd be surprised at what you're capable of doing. And there's always so much more, obviously, that I have to learn. And I like learning new things. And maybe for the longest time, I like learning new songs. It was always like, oh, this band wants me to play with them. I can't wait to get the songs so I can start learning them. So with like a new task is like tour managing, I was like, I feel like I can do that. I feel like it's something that I'd be okay spending my time doing. And once I took it on, I was really, really stoked to be doing it. And so from that point on, they wanted me to finish out the rest of this year and kind of see what goes on next year. But it's like, well, I'm glad that they're happy and they know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes and work my ass off to get the job done.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like you have kind of an advantage, like being a tour manager, because you were in a band and you know what you want from a tour manager? Like, because sometimes I feel like I have an advantage producing or mixing because I'm in a band and like I know what I want from them. So it's pretty easy to kind of like, oh yeah, well, if I was a tour manager, I want to, the things that are important to me is like when I wake up in the morning, I want a day sheet and I want to know where the nearest, coffee is, what the Wi-Fi password is and where are the showers, like.
Exactly. Yeah. This is what I would want. And that's how I see that my strengths, work in that way, as opposed to, if I had some other random job, I'm like, this isn't music. It's like, it is totally relatable for me. And even though I, can't roll out of my bunk, in the afternoon, it's like, I'm usually, one of the first guys like to be in the venue and get things rolling. It's like, I don't mind this because I don't mind working hard. It's just got to be for something that I'm passionate about. So, I would totally say that, for the most part, the guys can, whoever I work for, they can rely on me that, you've done this before. You don't want to suffer and like, you want to make this as easy as possible. So that's generally what I try to do.
No, that's cool. We actually have a lot of questions from subscribers. So You cool if I fire off some of those?
Fire off. I'll try to keep them brief. I sometimes just, we'll talk forever. So cut me off.
You and me both. I'm like diarrhea mouth. Chris, funny, I don't know if this is like a common thing or not, but Chris, Boosty, I forget how it came up, but anyways, he was telling me a story about me, and he mentioned that I will sometimes get him in what he calls a small talk headlock. And he's like, yeah, dude, sometimes you just won't shut up and you keep repeating yourself and you just keep talking about shit that doesn't matter. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm sorry. I just like talking to people.
It's like the Larry David stop and chat. And how do I get out of this.
Totally. Anyways, but yeah. Rodney says, the rhythm section and everything that you're involved with has always been a goal of mine to obtain. How the hell do you come up with such catchy riffs? They have the ability to be where I can literally hum them out and they're memorable. I guess what he's asking is, what is the secret to you writing such sick riffs?
Yeah. It's the hardest thing to answer, like how you are the way you are. I guess what I focus on for me as being a musical person is listening to good music for the most part, like listening to something that is inspiring to me, that the sound could influence how I am. So, I've always listened to things with good guitar playing for the most part. To me, it has good guitar playing. And, it stands out like, wow, that's a memorable riff. Like, that's like, I can do the same thing with all of my favorite bands. And like, even after just hearing it once.
Right.
So I've always just kind of wanted to write things that are memorable for other people, and just a little melody here and there. And I don't know how it got shaped in my mind of how a melody should be, but I always was like, well, I like this. At the end of the day, I'm like, hopefully my band likes this. Okay, the band, because ultimately you're writing for your band. Like,
right.
I mean, it starts with you. Hey, this isn't too bad. Might as well put it down on the record tape or put it into Pro Tools. And then you go, hey guys, you send it off to them, and it's like, you're nervous because you're like, I hope they like it. They could just totally say, no, this is dog crap, and just like, nope. And which we've all been there. It's like, wow, man, I thought that had a chance, but nope, dog crap. Yeah. So then, once they say, oh my God, like, I love that. That's great. You're just like, awesome. This is going to become something that gets thrown out to the rest of the world. And fortunately, like, a lot of, it's resonated with a lot of, the fans that, they're like, wow, that's something that they want to listen to as well.
Yeah.
But my whole thing is just be inspired by what you listen to, and, kind of push yourself to, create something that is, unique in a way. Is somewhat unique, originality is always a thing of like, man, I haven't heard this before. And, and this is kind of like a clever thing. It's just like kind of those few things. It's like, well, that makes, like, I am now content with this riff.
Right.
So other than that, that's all I got.
Here's another one from Rodney. He says, this may be odd, but I am really curious of the guitar tone on Nothing Left. I'm assuming you know what song he's talking about, right?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
During the opening riff, there seems to be this resonance woof coming from the guitars when they palm mute. It's always been kind of an ear candy thing for me. Any memory on what that setup and mic being used on that is?
That was, like I said, I mean, going back to that was Colin, or that was an Andy reamp.
What did you use for guitars?
For guitars back then, I feel like we always used a Les Paul Studio with an EMG 81 on that record. Mm-hmm. Nothing too crazy. Nothing just, that's kind of that was the standard back then, before, I guess, like Fishman influences came around. But I would say that, and maybe just like, I have like a pretty heavy right hand.
Yeah.
So I would say why maybe some things don't, what makes me sound different than some other players playing the same riff is that, well, I like beat into the strings really like hard without taking them out of pitch, obviously.
Yeah.
And Adam D is the same guy. I hand him a guitar and it's just like, very like overpowering right hand, James Hetfield, that kind of thing. So I would say that's a big part of it. But in as far as like the amp that was used, I'm like starting to draw a blank on that. But I know Colin Mike's. I would have to say that I just can't even remember. I wouldn't even want to give a wrong answer.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe I can find out again what it was, and I'll text it to you or something.
Okay. But the positive ID we got was Les Paul Studio with the EMG 81.
Yes.
It's so funny how that's just like the classic that everyone wants to hate on, but like has been so great on like so many records, you know?
Exactly. I mean, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But at the same time, there's, like the Fishman Fluence. It makes me want to play guitar more.
Oh yeah. I remember, dude, first day of rehearsals with you, and I remember I thought my rig sounded so sick, and then you showed up with your guitar, with
my Charvel,
yep, and just a 5150, and like your tone like blew me away, and I was like so like just confused and upset, and it's only a feeling that you get if you're a guitar player and another guitar player has his tone schools you, and you can't figure out why. You know what I mean? You're just like, dude, like my world just got turned upside down. I've always had the best tone. Like, what's going on right now? Am I in some sort of weird Twilight Zone? What the hell? And I just remember. And then like when you went to go to lunch, I think you went to Jimmy John's, and then I plugged my guitar into your amp, and I was like, oh man, this 5150 sounds awesome. And I was like, nope, still doesn't sound as good as Phil. And then I plugged your guitar into my amp, and I was like, shit, that sounds way better than my guitar. And then, but still, it was like, even when I picked up your guitar and plugged it into your amp, it was like, I still don't sound as crushing as Phil. Like, all right, fine, Phil, you win, you know?
It was my job to keep you on your toes. So, but, if you spend time with it enough, then you're just like, man, this feels so good. This sounds so good. And, I love my Charvel guitars, and I love, like, from the second I got my hands on one, I was really stoked on it. Same with the, throw the Fishman in there.
Yeah.
And I've always been happy with that. And it's like, I couldn't picture like really changing to something else at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, the Fishmans are just so sick. And like every other guitar that like comes into the studio, it's always like a noticeable difference. Even if the guitar player likes like his guitar a little bit better, and he's usually just kind of like, it's a mental block about it, the rest of the band always picks the guitar with the Fishmans in it. It's like, oh dude, that one's just better. It sounds clear and like way more just better. I can't even describe it. And it's like,
just better.
Shit.
More better. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, moving on. John Purifoy, he just says practice routines. Like, did you have any practice routines that you were doing? Like during when you were just like shredding all the time?
On tour?
Yeah. Or I guess maybe tour. Let's stick to touring.
Touring, I usually just had a few drinks.
Okay.
I didn't really warm up that often, and I didn't like warming up. I don't really like warming up, and it was also this back in As I Dying days. I was just, I'd come home from tour and not even touch my guitar for weeks. So it was just, if I'm not inspired to like pick it up and like create with it, then I don't have like practice techniques and things really. Over the years, I've kind of learned. Maybe as I was getting more technical things with As I Die, I was like, okay, this kind of might as well, But I always felt confident that if I had like a drink or a few drinks, that my mind would not be overthinking as much as I do. And I would just play guitar because it felt good to play guitar. As opposed to, I got to play this riff perfectly. I got to play this song perfectly. And oh no, I just messed up. And then now that I'm thinking that I messed up, I'm messing up again, like on this next part. And it's just like, I'd rather just be loose and calm and just enjoy playing and enjoy how it sounds. So I think once I started jamming with you guys, I just was getting to this point of, I like just playing guitar more often.
Right.
So it's not that I'm warming up. I'm just like, this is fun again. Like, this is fun to do.
Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, I do remember you were just always jamming, no matter what. You were like, yeah. Now that I actually think about it, you just always had a guitar and you were creating back there.
Yeah,
back in Phil's apartment in the back of the bus that you took over our back lounge.
Well, I was also learning a lot of things too. Like, I mean, if I'm learning nail songs, and it's like, well, that kind of was my warm up on Taste of Chaos. Was like, oh, I got these nail songs I gotta learn. You know, like, oh, I'm good on this Seosin stuff speed wise, and that's what, you know. And then with, you know, there's this other band that I was trying out for at the time, and I was learning all these like solos and stuff, and then I was trying to make Seosin songs have more butt rock stuff to it, like with these squeals and bends. I was like, yeah, like, you know, I feel like I'm just immersed in guitar right now and just having fun with it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We covered this a little bit. Dave Escobar says, I'd love to hear about As I Lay Dying working with Colin Richardson and Adam D. Any details about those sessions would be awesome. We kind of discussed it a little bit. Can you tell us anything? Royce Whitaker says, I'm really interested to know Adam D's tracking methods and what he uses in his chain. His stuff is always the tightest. Any insight on that?
Oh, I mean, back then I wasn't looking over the engineer's shoulder as much as I do now. Mm-hmm. So I can't really...
Right.
Adam is very... I mean, like the first record working with Adam, knowing his history, having toured with Killswitch, you know, it's kind of a nervous sort of like, oh, he's going to track me and know that and learn that I really suck at guitar, and I'm going to be frustrated with myself, and like, he's probably going to be like, I could do that in my sleep. Mm-hmm. And so I was like really nervous, and Adam, he knows me, like we're really good buddies, and he's always told me, he's like, you think way too much about stuff. And he is a pretty less is more kind of guy. And I've always just wanted to hear guitars a certain way. And like on the Powerless Rise, he thought I was crazy. And I think he stopped tracking me. And Daniel Castleman would come in because I mean, I liked working with Daniel a lot. And I think Daniel was patient with me with how crazy I was. And he was also willing to do whatever it was, versus Adam who's like, no, man, it's fine. Don't, like, it doesn't need to be changed. And I'd be like, no, I'm looking at it right there.
Right.
I heard it, but I'm also pointing at the waveform of what I want changed. You know?
Yeah.
And so, but I listen back to those guitars and I say those are, like, to me, some, like, they're pretty tight guitars, you know? Like,
yeah.
I'm proud at how tight it, like, you could solo those out, and anyone who wanted to hear them, it's like, those, like, that's the best I could do. And like, I'm, pretty stoked on it. So, I think Adam, as much as like he's done so many like metal, like more mechanical metal records, Adam's like a rock guy. And a lot of times he's like, I only listen to top 40 radio. Like he's very pop, structure oriented, as in just a song being a good song and having a good flow to it.
Yeah. And you hear that a lot with Killswitch.
Absolutely. They know how to write a hit. So I think he knew enough that we were good players. He had, as a producer, you've got all the elements there that can do their job. It's just he has to kind of trim the fat and, be the overseer of all things. Because as a producer, that's, you're making sure from coming from your demo sessions, getting your drums in order, your prelay and all that stuff, and getting all your markers and just the structure of the recording process. It starts here and it ends here, and it's got to be done, or else it's on your producer's ass.
Right. Now, would you say, working with Adam and Bill Stevenson, they were basically the two producers that you guys worked with in As I Lay Dying, right?
Yes.
Did they have did they kind of like track records like in the traditional sense of like, okay, let's track drums first, then bass, then guitars, then vocals, or was there anything unusual about the way either one of them worked that you remember?
I would say no, pretty traditional. Drums going first, and then guitars, and then, splitting it off to bass and vocals once rhythms for a song were done. And then, I would do a lot of the overdubs, and if a song had a lead that Nick was playing or a solo, then he would do it. And for the albums that Adam did, we eventually got to a point where we set up 2 guitar stations to where I could be tracking, like all the rhythms, and then Nick could be doing whatever leads and the solos he was doing. So we could both kind of be productive during the day, as opposed to, hey, I'm going to, work first from 8 to, 8, or not 8 a.m., probably like 10 a.m. to like 6 p.m., and then you come in 6 p.m. to midnight. It was like, no, we both want to work during the day, so we would start getting these 2 guitar stations going, having 2 different engineers.
That's cool.
So I think it was like everyone could feel like they're productive during the day, but nothing really crazy, pretty traditional still.
You guys just mainly double track guitars or like quad rhythms?
Always double rhythms for sure. And then we would do thunder chugs, as we would call them. So for a lot of the heavy parts, we would throw another 2 guitars in there, and that would sort of thicken things up here and there. Really make it punch, I guess.
So when you call it thunder chugs, would it, like, say if you had a riff that was kind of like so you would basically do another track that was like type of thing?
It would be, shout out to Unearth, by the way.
Yeah. Dude, best breakdown ever of all time.
I know you're a fan. Yeah, definitely one of the best for sure. I would say we would probably, actually just the chugs. Just why not? But
just to kind of make those heavier?
Yeah, just really get that thicker sound out of the chugs. And I don't know, we just kind of always did that. And yeah, we just always did that.
Okay, awesome. Kyle Davis, wondering about your musical background growing up. Did you have any musical background growing up?
I did. I started playing guitar when I was 10. I saw the Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit video probably, when I was 9 or something. So I didn't get my hands on a guitar until I was 10, and my dad was like, well, if you're going to play this, then you're going to take lessons. So I immediately got into lessons, and my older brother as well. He's a few years older, and we started with classical guitar. And so our teacher was classically trained, and that was, learning notes and all that notation and all that stuff. So it was something that has always kind of been, part of my mind, I guess, with, having this attachment to classical music. But I'd also be learning about Alice in Chains and Weezer. And I'd ask my teacher, like, can you teach me, like, their songs? And so half the lesson would be like classical, and then, hey, did you do your homework and all this stuff? And the other half would be him teaching me all these, riffs from bands that I really like loved. And then I started seeing, when you watch someone learning, like picking apart a riff, like learning, okay, where's the root note? Here's the root note. And then here's the scale they're kind of doing. And then just watching them do it, then write it down for you. All right, here you go, kid, go learn it. And that's kind of when I started learning other people's songs. Because I had seen him do it, I started feeling confident that, hey, maybe I could do this. So I did lessons with him for, I want to say 3 years, and like every weekend, 3 years. And then I think my parents moved, and then I had to stop doing lessons. Always still playing guitar. I was always grounded a lot, so if I couldn't go out and skateboard, I would have guitar to do, and Guitar World, and like I said, learning people's songs. And then I got lessons from another teacher who was more of like this shreddy guy. He taught me like some Van Halen stuff, and taught me how to like improvise over all these chords, and kind of basic chords like blues stuff, and then just improvise. Like, here's your scale, and just go. And he'd show me some little bendies and techniques and stuff here and there that he would do, and then I would, try to do the same. And so I've always had kind of this ability to sort of improvise over some stuff. Whereas, like, hey, I got this rhythm, track going. Maybe it needs like this melody over it too. So then, I could easily do kind of a rhythm and then a lead, and so that's kind of how I was shaped into the guitar player I am, is from those two guys who their influence on me, I guess.
Cool. I wish so badly I would have gotten guitar lessons as a kid, but I never did.
That's pretty good for, I mean, you hear those guys, they're like, oh, that guy's he just learned all on his own. It's like, that's crazy. You need, but I'm sure hearing your story of how it shaped your playing, it's like you probably just watched guys like really closely, or you've always had a great ear, obviously, if you've been attracted to production. So it's like, it's a crazy journey going that way too.
Yeah. Okay. Zach Knight says, what kind of music inspires you now? Are you still a metal mostly guy, or do you find new styles more interesting? Like the fact that pop music has had a subtle tropical influences appear over the past 5 years, etc.
I will always like a band, an artist with good guitar playing. It's what I've always attracted to. Do I always want to listen to guitar playing? No. I listen mostly these days to classical music. So I'm going back to my roots, but I've always, had this attraction to composing and doing more violin scoring stuff. So I listen to a lot of like Hans Zimmer. I love James Newton Howard and Danny Elfman. I love, that style of, these are instruments I can't play with my hands, but I can get a keyboard and I can do the MIDI for it. And, I guess, you go to like Trent Reznor and like Atticus Ross, and you're like, man, these are just crazy sounds. And it's like, I attract a lot to that as well. But generally, I love bands like, Opeth, Mastodon for kind of the out there, spacey sort of stuff. And, same with like In Flames will always be one of my favorite bands, because I think Bjorn just has one of those ears for melodies that it's like that aligns with what I would want to hear. So, but
Me too.
Yeah, right. So but I do listen. I like a good pop hit. I like a good, Ace of Base was the first CD I ever got. And every time I hear Ace of Base, I'm like, God, these are like the best melodies ever. Like and that was just pop music way back then. And it's like, I've always had that, respect for pop music, but do I care most of the time? No, it sort of has to find me, before I would go out and find a good pop song.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Plus, it's like, man, have you ever tried to go find a good pop song, like on iTunes or something? You have to sift through 20 pounds of crap.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just not even worth it. Like, my brain is drained after hearing like the first 6 garbage pail songs,
Yeah, same way. Like, there's I guess I won't even say this example. I might lose all metal credibility. Okay. Yes, I agree.
Okay. Let's see. Mark Wustenhagen, he says, any advice on how to build picking hand stamina like yours? I know a lot of practice is key, but if you could, any advice, and not just like play song X over and over again.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The thing is, I didn't get into metal music until I was like a junior or a senior in high school. So I was into punk music, and I guess emo had like a phase, but emo I would not say contributed to my. I hate even saying emo, but
I'm
like
just picturing you
stuff.
with like red eyeliner and like a comb, like a swoopy front, like shoulder length, like red tips haircut. You know,
I never did red tips. I never did eyeliner. I did the girl jeans. We'll say that. Shout out to whoever wore girl jeans before it was, getting made fun of, right? It's like, wait, I'm like a metalhead now too, like metalheads wear girl jeans.
right?
But I listen. Okay, anyway, back to it. I'm from San Diego, so it's like, bro punk is, like such the norm. But like, I love bands like Strung Out, Lagwagon, No Effects, and stuff like that. So guys who like probably grew up listening to like Slayer and stuff, like that's how, and Metallica, like that's how they got their speed and like their right hand ability. And then I'm listening to those guys to get like my speed and right hand ability.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then once I got into metal, it wasn't really a hard transition because I understood, I guess maybe from my years of like classical, I'm like, oh, this is D minor. I'm like, or, drop C minor, whatever it was. It's like, I get this scale, like I can do that. So I guess, it was an easy transition. And then, but that's, I guess then I was getting into the Metallicas, and then I was getting into like this and that. And I was like, man, and Fear Factory. And I was like, man, Dino's right hand is like the fastest and most mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I still listen to Fear Factory to this day, and I'm like, God, like Dino, like it's crazy. It's inhuman. So I've always like been drawn to that. So it's not, or like, I guess Meshuggah you could say too. And it's like, it's not hard for me to do. I don't know. Like I've just always been like, yes, right hand of death. And like, if you could down pick it or like downstroke it, that's what you got to do.
I agree. Well, dude, Phil, it's been awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. This was great. And again, thanks for taking the time. And I think people are going to be psyched.
I hope so. And thanks for having me on it, Beau. And it's been nice to finally catch up after, having a few months off.
I know. We got to get back at it.
Let's riff out one of these days.
All right, cool. I'll talk to you, Phil. Thanks.
All right, later.
Bye.
The Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast is brought to you by Line 6. Line 6 is a musical instruments manufacturing company that specializes in guitar amp and effects modeling and makes guitars, amps, effects pedals, and multi-effects. We introduced the world's first digital modeling amp, and we're behind the groundbreaking Pod Multi-Effect, which revolutionized the industry with an easy way to record guitar with great tone. Line 6 will always take dramatic leaps so you can reach new heights with your music. Go to www.line6.com to find out more about Line 6. To get in touch with the URM podcast, visit urm.com/podcast and subscribe today.